if you think this administration is evil. This is Wretched Radio, taking you back to the first century to perhaps provide some perspective, some context, to encourage you and me as we noodle through how do we submit to a government that ain't so good. That would be an understatement right there. When you have a government that works tirelessly to make legislation, to not just permit, but to praise behavior that even nature says no, to work tirelessly to take innocent human lives in the wombs of mothers and pay for it by using the taxes of the people, you could say that's pretty evil. I don't think we should lose sight of that. I know those words are harsh these days. What did you think about Herod when he slew the children under the age of 2? Now, that was who knows how many kids, small town, maybe a couple dozen, maybe 10. Every day, tick, 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 thousands of babies with the government's blessing, sanction, and praise says, thumbs up, Planned Parenthood. Here's some more money from our citizens. And yet, if we travel back in time, we will see that when Titus was admonished to submit to every governing authority, it was way nastier. From a commentary on must be an up-and-comer, John MacArthur Jr. writes this: the Roman government under which the early church lived not only was thoroughly pagan and morally debauched, but was also despotic, oppressive, unjust, and brutal. That's a rough place to live right there. Nevertheless, Paul makes clear the Christian's obligation to respect and obey human government does not rest on its being democratic or just, but solely on its being the God-ordained means by which human society is regulated. Remember, bad government, better no government. If you think that a place is out of control underneath a despot, you should see what it is like when there's nobody running the place. It's Lord of the Flies. You would cry out for a rotten government at that point. Seriously, no government is that bad. It is God's administration for running the universe. Now, please remember, there are other realms of authority, and we recognize the church is one realm, the family is the other realm, and Caesar has no beeswax in either one of those realms. And if he does stick his nose or scepter into it, we can say, no, I must obey God. And yet, we're at the same time commanded, but if it's not commanding you to sin or keeping you from being obedient, submit, even when the government is Titus-like. Whew. From John MacArthur, we are to be obedient to human authorities. The only exception regards the commanding us to do something that is against the command of God. There you have it. If you're commanded to do something that is sinful or kept from doing what you are commanded, then you do not have to obey the government. Other than that, even when it's a rotten government, which was the context of Titus and Romans 13, Paul mentions, this is from MacArthur, in Romans 13, 7 reasons why all people, including believers, are under divine obligation to respect and obey human government. First, the governing authorities were established by God. Second, the person who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God. That's sobering. We better make sure that we have our theology straight here in how we are supposed to submit to the government. Third, those who oppose such authority will receive condemnation upon themselves. Fourth, government is designed to restrain evil and therefore not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. So if you're going to resist when it's not something that is a command to sin or keeping you from performing a command delivered by our supreme authority, you submit. Government is designed to restrain evil, not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Fifth, it is divinely designed to promote the good of individuals and of society. Sixth, conversely, it is also divinely empowered to punish wrongdoers, if necessary, by capital punishment. Seventh, for believers, it is necessary to be subject to government, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. It's kind of interesting to me that in the commentaries for both Titus chapter 3 and Romans chapter 13, that's what Dr. MacArthur does with those passages. Hey, the job description that they give right there, that the government is supposed to bear the sword, that they are to punish evildoers, never explores that statement is somehow a caveat to the clear command to submit. Instead, he sees it as one of the reasons why we should submit. Because if you don't, you're going to receive the sword. Let me take you now to the Romans 13 commentary, where we learn more about the first century church, especially in the time of Jesus. We hear what it was like to pay taxes under a regime and administration very wicked. Our Lord was born into a society where political corruption and autocratic rule were common. Merciless tyrants, murderous dictators were everywhere, along with human slavery, unchallenged norms of wickedness. By some estimates, I did not know this, the Roman Empire of that day had 3 slaves for every free person. Whoa. When Paul writes to Titus, then telling bondservants to submit, whoa. When we see him writing that, when Peter writes about that in 1 Peter, whoa. He was talking to the majority of people potentially. Although a vassal of Rome, the Idumean King Herod ruled most of Palestine, including Judea and Samaria, with autocratic cruelty. Remember, he wanted to kill the kids. The Jews were little more than Roman chattel, an underprivileged and oppressed minority. They had no voice at any level of government and little legal recourse for injustices. And Jesus says, pay your taxes. They are not good, pay your taxes. Because my kingdom is not of this world. I'm about a different business here. I'm doing something eternal, not temporal. And while we certainly take care of the affairs of the day, we do not put them at the pinnacle of the mountain of purpose for our existence. It is to be like Jesus, suffering with him, so that people can be brought out of darkness into his marvelous light. When the day of judgment comes, we are going to long for being able to go back and ask and consider, did I do everything I could to spare people from the wrath that is to come? Because that's what we're supposed to be about. Taxes were exorbitant, and government-approved overcharging and extortion by tax collectors made the financial burden on the people immeasurably worse. And Jesus didn't say, but it's okay, you don't have to pay them because these guys are really nasty. Nope. Pay your taxes. This is a reminder of the radical call to Christianity and to Jesus Christ. We're in a different game here. I don't know if you've crossed that bridge yet. You think about somebody going into a cult. They're just done with the world. And they tend to be done with, they just cut it off because they're singularly focused. Now, here's the difference between Christianity and a cult. We don't cut ourselves off from the world. We live in the world with joy, submitting so that the world might be one to him. Not just sitting outside in darkness outside of our barbed wire fence. No, we want them to be one, and that is why Paul admonishes Titus, and he admonishes the Romans, and Peter admonishes people who are dispersed all throughout the Mediterranean. Submit. Submit. It's bad. I'm doing something bigger. Have you crossed that bridge? Are you in? Do we remember the radical call of Christ? Put your hand to the plow. Don't look back, because if you do, you're not fit for the kingdom. Let the dead bury their own dead. Your love for me should make your love for your parents look like hatred. That's the call of Christ. And that's that radical call isn't just radical because we're annoyed at our current government. That was in the context of a really nasty government. Many of Jesus' disciples expected him to free them from Roman yoke. But he made no call for political or social reform. Even by peaceful means, he never attempted to capture the culture for biblical morality or to gain greater freedom. To the contrary, he declared unambiguously, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God's. Changing the form of government or superficially moralizing it were not Jesus' goals. When he was not preaching, he was demonstrating compassion for the pain and hardships of men and women and children. Even the most casual reading of the Gospels reveals that his compassion was not merely emotional or idealistic. He only empathized with sinners, but healed countless thousands of every sort of disease, often at great personal sacrifice. Social morality and structure were never his concern. Going back in time perhaps will remind us we are called to something greater. This is Wretched Radio.
Hey,
Todd.
sweet.
Take her around the block a few times?
Who's a good girl? You're not, because nobody does good. No, not one. Romans 5 says we're born in sin and iniquity, and our hearts are deceitful and wicked. You know that if you'd use the law, which brings about the knowledge of sin.